Becoming the person no one believes you can be, not even you. How transformation begins with a silent decision no one applauds. Maybe you don't talk about it with anyone. Maybe you don't even know how to name it, but you feel it. You feel like there's something more inside you, a longing to become something else, not bigger, not better, just more whole, more true. And at the same time, you feel the shame of trying again. After so many broken promises, after so many times you said, this time it's real, and it wasn't. It's hard to trust yourself when even your own echo has let you down. It's exhausting to change in silence. It's painful to desire a new version of yourself while feeling invisible, even to yourself. Because with every failed attempt, the doubt grows louder. Was I ever meant for more, or am I just fooling myself? And the shame of simply dreaming starts to hurt more than failure. You begin to shrink from within, to doubt everything, to settle for less. Not out of gratitude, but out of fear. Stoicism didn't come to applaud you. It came to remind you of who you can be when no one believes anymore, not even you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." This isn't about convincing anyone. It's about deciding right now in silence that you will begin. Not for hope, but for honor. Not for applause, but for coherence. Because you are tired. Not of trying, but of abandoning yourself. This decision doesn't need to be grand. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It only needs to be real. Like a sculptor working at night with no witnesses, shaping a block of stone the world still calls ruin. But he knows what he's doing. He sees what no one else sees. He feels what has yet to take form. And then, day by day, stroke by stroke, blow by blow, he insists, even in the dark, even in silence, even alone. Because the truth is simple and hard. No one will believe in you until you've repeated yourself quietly enough. No one will see until you've already transformed. No one will applaud while you're still sweating in the dark. And that's okay, because true transformation never begins with an audience. It begins with pain, with decision, with discipline. You don't need them to believe in you. You just need to decide you won't betray yourself anymore. Even if you see no results yet, even if your inner voice says it's too late, even if everything inside whispers it won't work. Because now, you don't need certainty. You only need to keep going. One gesture, one choice, one day at a time, until what was once invisible becomes inevitable. The identity hidden in repetition, why who you become, is shaped by what you repeat when no one is watching. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It's the pain of trying and not changing. The pain of repeating small daily gestures, waking early, breathing deeply, staying calm, saying no to what drains you, and feeling like none of it matters. And so you lose heart, because it seems like all effort is wasted, like no one sees, like even you can't feel it. But what you don't realize is that it's precisely in those invisible gestures that your identity begins to shift. Transformation is not an event, it's an accumulation. It doesn't come like a revelation. It comes like erosion, like drops falling in the same place day after day, carving stone. It may seem useless, but it's not. You're simply in the middle of the process, and the middle is the easiest place to quit, because nothing looks different yet. Stoicism doesn't ask for grand acts. It asks for presence. It asks for repetition, because to the Stoics, identity isn't belief, it's embodied habit. It doesn't matter what you think about yourself. It matters what you repeat, because that's what the brain understands. That's what the body memorizes. That's what life recognizes as true. Want to change who you are? Change what you repeat. And don't wait to feel something special. The brain doesn't respond to your intentions. It responds to your patterns. Change begins before belief, before confidence, before motivation. It begins in raw action, dry, emotionless, unseen. Repeat, with presence, with dignity, with the humility of one who knows that great transformations begin with small, quiet gestures. Brush your teeth with attention. Walk as someone who carries a story, even if no one knows it. Write one sentence a day, even if you think it means nothing. This repetition isn't shaping your day. It's shaping who you are becoming. Think of a drop of water. Alone, it's fragile. But if it falls every day in the same spot, with the same presence, with the same rhythm, it outlasts stone. Not by strength, but by persistence. Your future identity is hidden in the gestures you dismiss. And one day when you look back, you'll see it was in the middle of the repetition no one saw, that everything began to change. And right there, you were already someone else, even if you didn't realize it, even if no one noticed yet. The danger of waiting to feel ready. How hesitation quietly becomes your new identity. You wait because you don't feel brave yet, because you're not convinced yet, because you're still not sure it will work. And this waiting feels wise. It feels mature, but it's just fear. Fear dressed as logic, fear disguised as preparation, and time keeps passing until what was once a pause becomes your identity. The danger isn't in waiting. It's in becoming someone who always waits, someone who only starts when everything seems perfect. And since perfect never arrives, that person never begins. Slowly, they begin to believe that this not starting is just who they are. That's just how I am, they say. And without realizing it, they wear the label born from fear. Stoicism is clear. Action creates clarity, not the other way around. You don't need to feel ready to act. You need to act to begin feeling capable. But the world taught you the opposite. It told you confidence comes first, then action. But no, first comes the step, then comes the confidence. Because confidence is not a condition, it's a consequence. Every time you hesitate, you're feeding a version of yourself that still doesn't believe. But every time you move, even shaking, that version starts to go quiet because it realizes it's no longer in control. That action arrived before permission, and that changes everything. Choose one micro act of exposure per day, something small that feels ridiculous, that no one sees, but that pulls you out of this state of polite paralysis. Maybe record a voice note. Send a message you've been postponing for weeks. Say out loud what you need to hear, because courage is born in friction, not in comfort. Think of a ship built to sail, but still docked at the harbor, waiting for the right wind, waiting for calm seas, waiting for the blessing of the sky. And in the meantime, it starts to rust. Slowly, silently, until one day it no longer moves. You don't need favorable winds. You just need to untie the ropes and trust that it's better to move without direction than to wait until you're incapable of leaving. Because time doesn't heal hesitation. It just turns it into destiny. And that destiny you still have time to reject. Begin, even now, even like this, even small, because everything you need has already begun within you. All that's missing is one step, just one, not needing to feel, only to go. The posture of someone who has decided. How your body whispers to the world what you secretly believe about yourself. Before you say a single word, your body has already spoken. Before you try to convince anyone, your shoulders have already revealed your truth. The way you walk, the way you look, the way you take up space. All of this says, without sound, what you truly believe about yourself. You can repeat mantras, you can study philosophy, you can create plans. But if your body stays hunched, if your breath stays shallow, if your gaze stays low, it means something inside you hasn't yet decided. Something still hesitates, still seeks permission, still searches for validation in someone else's reflection. Stoicism isn't about appearance, it's about integrity, and integrity begins in the body, not for aesthetics, but for coherence. Because when the soul is at peace, it reflects in posture, not as arrogance, but as presence. And presence is what arrives before words, what communicates before speech, what leaves an impression without trying to impress. When you truly decide, something changes in your neck, something steadies in your spine, something softens in your eyes, and it's not magic, it's memory. The body remembers who you're choosing to become, and it starts to walk like that person. Even if inside you still feel afraid, even if the inner voices are still unclear. You don't need to look strong. You just need to stop walking like someone apologizing for existing, like someone carrying an excuse instead of a story. Because every scar you carry is sacred, every flaw part of the path, and your posture must learn to honor that, not to hide it. Think of a tree. Even twisted by the wind, it still grows upward, still reaches for the light, still claims its space. It doesn't apologize for its curve. It doesn't hide from its bend. It remains. And in that persistence lies its beauty. Walk like someone who has already decided, even if the decision is recent, even if no one believes it yet, even if you're still learning to carry it, because the world hears your presence before it hears your voice. And when your presence changes, the world changes with it, silently, gradually, inevitably. You don't need permission to outgrow who you were. While loyalty to your old self can become betrayal to your future, change hurts, but suffocating hurts more. You feel it when you try to fit into places where you no longer belong, when you repeat behaviors that no longer match your soul, when you try to be understood by people who stopped seeing you. And then comes the question, am I being inconsistent? Am I betraying who I was? But there's a kind of loyalty that wounds, the loyalty to your old self. Stoicism doesn't bind you to the past. It calls you to the reason of the present. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this, that virtue is not remaining the same, but staying aligned with the logos, the consciousness of the now. That means you can change. You must change, not out of trend, but out of truth. Because sometimes growth feels like betrayal, but it's really just fidelity to your evolution. You might feel guilty for wanting more, for craving silence where once you chased applause, for seeking depth where once you settled for distraction. But that guilt isn't a sign of error. It's a sign of transition. It only shows up because you're still clinging to an old narrative, to that version of you that tried so hard to please, to be understood, to be accepted. Now it's time to let go, to allow the new identity to have space, even if it seems arrogant to those who stayed behind, even if it feels like rupture to those who didn't walk your inner journey. You don't need permission to grow. Growth is not betrayal. It's gratitude in motion. It's honoring who you were by allowing that version to make space for who you are becoming. Write a farewell letter, not for others, for the version of yourself that needs to go, the one who doubted, who shrank, who said yes out of fear of being left behind. Say to them, thank you, but now I move on, with pain, yes, with uncertainty, yes, but with the dignity of someone who no longer wants to fit where they already overflowed. Think of a snake. It bleeds to shed its skin. It tears itself open to stay alive. Not out of vanity, but out of necessity, because keeping the old skin would mean a slow death. You are changing, and that's what's scary, but it's also what's freeing. It's not about stopping being you. It's about finally being you, without apology, without asking permission, without needing an audience. Only with the courage of someone who knows suffocating out of loyalty is just a hidden form of giving up. And you didn't come this far to give up. You came to continue, even if it means leaving a part of yourself behind. Speak to yourself like someone who matters. How your internal voice shapes your future more than any opinion ever could. The way you speak to yourself shapes the way you live. It's not exaggeration, it's structure, because every recurring thought becomes a belief, and every belief builds an invisible boundary inside you. The problem is, most of the voices in your mind didn't originate from you. They were inherited, from looks that judged, from words that wounded, from silences that abandoned. And over time, you began repeating these voices without realizing. You're not good enough. You always mess things up. You're too late. These phrases became the soundtrack of your inner world. And even when you try to move, they pull you back, because deep down you started believing them, believing that this constant criticism is the truth. But it's not. It's just habit. Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. That means you don't have to accept everything you think. You can question it. You can choose a new way to speak to yourself. You can build instead of repeat, because your inner voice doesn't need to be an echo. It can be a guide. It can be healing. Start by listening. Notice which self-destructive phrase shows up most during difficult days. The oldest one, the most automatic. And then create a new one, not a cliché, something grounding, something present, something simple like, I'm still here, or today I continue. Something that reminds you that you matter, that you deserve care, that you don't need to hurt to grow. Think of a cracked mirror. It still reflects, but it distorts. And the more you look at yourself in it, the more you believe that distorted image is the real one. Until one day, you decide to replace it. You decide to see yourself with new eyes. You decide you will no longer sustain the old narrative. You matter, and that's not vanity. It's foundation, because no one builds on self-contempt. We only build on dignity. So speak to yourself like someone who deserves to be heard, like someone who is starting over, not because they failed, but because they finally chose themselves. And that choice, repeated with love, with firmness, with truth, is what will shape the new world you can't see yet, but have already begun to live in. Discipline is a silent form of faith. Why showing up when you don't believe is already a spiritual act. Not every day you will believe in yourself, in the process, in the path. Some mornings you'll wake up with a chest full of doubt and everything inside will feel small, meaningless, stuck. And it's on those days that discipline reveals its true face, not as control, but as faith. Discipline is a spiritual act because it doesn't require certainty. It requires presence. It requires showing up even when the ground disappears, even when no one is watching, even when the results don't appear. The Stoic understands that virtue doesn't need an audience, that continuing without applause is a form of honor. You think you should only persist when you feel motivated, but what shapes your character isn't enthusiasm, it's return. That act you repeat again and again and again, even tired, even discouraged, even unseen, because somewhere deep within you decided not to abandon yourself. Doing what needs to be done when you believe is easy, but doing it when you doubt is sacred, because it means you've chosen integrity over the emotion of the moment, that you've chosen the path even without seeing the finish line, that you stood up even when everything inside whispered it's no longer worth it. Marking your own loyalty with simple gestures is a form of prayer. The coffee you prepare with care, the book you read even when exhausted, the silent workout, the organized space, the deep breath before starting the day. Small acts, but they carry invisible power because you do them without knowing if they're working. And precisely because of that, they work. Think of a monk praying in the desert. He doesn't know if he'll be heard. He has no guarantee of a reply, but he prays because prayer isn't about receiving. It's about keeping the flame alive. Discipline is that flame. It says every day in silence, I'm still here. And that presence, sustained without audience, without certainty, without glory, is what transforms doubt into strength, fear into direction, weakness into faith. Not faith in something external, but faith in yourself, in who you are choosing to become, even if the world doesn't see it yet, even if you don't fully see it yet, because something in you already knows. Continuing is the deepest answer you can give to life. The lie behind, I'm just being realistic. How fear dresses up as logic to keep you small. You've said it, I'm just being realistic. And at the time, it sounded like wisdom, like maturity, like prudence. But deep down, it was fear. Fear wearing elegant clothes, fear with well-structured arguments, fear with logic, with calm, with a balanced tone of voice. But still, fear. That phrase, I'm being realistic, usually appears when the soul is already tired of trying, when you want to avoid the pain of failing again. So you retreat, and to avoid looking like a coward, you call it reason, common sense, maturity. But Stoicism doesn't confuse prudence with paralysis. To the Stoic, Prudence means acting with intention, not hiding behind perfect reasoning. Every fear can be re-examined because fear, before anything, is an opinion, and opinions can change. They're shaped by experience, by the voices you've heard, by the stories you've told yourself so many times. They started to feel like facts, but they're just stories. And if they're stories, you can rewrite them. Start by observing. Every time you say, "I'm not the kind of person who," pause, breathe, question it. Who taught you that? When did you decide that? And most of all, is it still true? Or have you just never had the courage to test the opposite? You don't have to break everything at once, but you must stop using reason as a shield for stagnation. Because fear only dominates those who feed it with justifications, and quiet courage is born when you simply stop explaining so much and start acting humbly. Think of a cell. The bars seem solid, but they're open. It's just that you've been inside for so long. You've gotten used to the small space. You've decorated the walls. You even like the shade. And the fear of leaving is greater than the discomfort of staying. But now you know the cell is open. You can stand. You can take the first step. You don't need to explain it. You just need to walk out slowly, without rage, with the dignity of someone who realized they were shrinking in the name of a logic that wasn't theirs. And now, with or without courage, with or without certainty, you choose to become greater than the story that kept you trapped. You are not too late. You are just unready to begin without applause. How timing is often just fear with a calendar. You look around. Other people seem to have moved forward. They have plans, achievements, stability, and you, still trying to begin, still unsure, still stuck at the starting point. And the feeling of being late weighs on you. It hurts. It makes you wonder if you missed some secret window, if you wasted time you'll never get back. But maybe you're not late. Maybe you're just waiting for something that will never come, the perfect moment, or worse, the applause before the effort. Most people don't just want to start. They want to start being seen. They want to start with support, with validation, with a guaranteed, "it will work out." But the truth is different. True beginnings are lonely, dark, quiet. The world only notices later, and later only arrives if you have the courage to plant before anyone believes. Stoicism doesn't say, "wait for the right time." It says, "act now with what you have," because the right time doesn't exist. What exists is your willingness to begin even without knowing if anyone will notice, even without knowing if there will be a result, even without knowing if it will be something big or small. Size comes later. Value comes later. Recognition comes if it comes. But the choice is now. You feel late because you compare yourself to other people's timelines. But there is no timeline, no script. There is only the present moment, and in it, the choice. The choice to start something, to give shape to what exists only in thought. To take a concrete step, even without witnesses. Choose a project, a small one, a path only you know matters, and begin, without telling, without justifying, without promising. Just begin. Because what begins in silence grows with roots, grows without bending to the wind, grows with strength. Think of seeds. They sprout in the dark, beneath the soil, out of sight, without an audience, without applause. But when they break through the ground, they are already unstoppable. You are not late. You are maturing in silence. And when respected, silence prepares the ground for everything that is to come. So begin, not to prove something, but to honor what only you can plant. The world will see it later, but you need to see it now, even in the dark, even alone, because the right time is this. The time when you stop waiting and finally begin. Confidence is built in the absence of certainty. How believing in yourself is not a requirement, it's a result. You wait to feel confident before you act. You wait to believe in yourself before exposing yourself. But what if it's the opposite? What if confidence isn't the starting point, but the result of movement? Waiting for confidence to begin is like waiting to be ready to fall. It never happens. Because true confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to keep going despite it. Most people think self-confidence is a feeling, but in truth, it's a construction, a result, something born out of friction, of mistakes, of repetition, of falling, and choosing to rise again. You don't build confidence in theory, you build it in practice, in presence, in the body that shows up even shaking, in the voice that speaks even weak. Stoicism teaches that the value of an action lies not in its result, but in its upright intention, in the courage to execute it without guarantees. That means real strength isn't in those who believe they will win, it's in those who act as if they already have, not out of arrogance, but out of respect for their own process. You want to trust yourself? Then act. Act before the belief, act before the certainty, act before the conviction, because confidence appears along the way, like someone waking from sleep and realizing they've been walking for a long time. You can start by pretending, yes, faking outer conviction until the inner one shows up. That's not deception, it's strategy. It's like iron being heated before it takes form. Resistance is the beginning of transformation. Think of someone being forged. The heat is intense, the shape still undefined, but the intention is already there, and with each blow the form appears. The firmness grows, the outline becomes clear, so too with confidence. It's not a gift, it's a sculpture, a work made of doubt, persistence, and silence. You don't need to feel ready, you only need to keep going, because those who continue, even without knowing if they're going in the right direction, are already closer to themselves than those who wait for certainty before they begin. Confidence is not a feeling, it's action, and to act now is what transforms you, even if fear is still there, because it will be, but you will already be greater than it, and that is what changes everything. The world won't believe you until you repeat yourself quietly enough. How consistency is the only true language of transformation. You waited for someone to see, for someone to notice, for someone to say, now you've really changed. But the recognition never came, and maybe it never will. That's where most people give up, because they confuse transformation with spectacle, change with conquest. But real change is repetition. Repetition without an audience. Repetition without applause. Repetition without response. The world doesn't respond to intentions. It responds to patterns, and patterns are formed when you insist, when you continue, when you repeat yourself with integrity until you become undeniable, until one day they look at you and say, you've changed. But until then, no one will see. Until then, you'll be in the dark, in the silence, in persistence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and constancy is not emotion, it's choice. It's the gesture you make when no one's watching. It's the yes you give to your inner rebuilding, without posting, without announcing, without asking for permission. Stoic virtue is moral repetition, not occasional inspiration. You don't need to prove anything, you just need to continue. You just need to make your next gesture your quietest argument, because every act, no matter how small, is carving a new version of you, not with force, but with insistence, like a river carving through rock, not from rage, but from loyalty. You don't need to shout your change. You need to live it, day after day, in exhaustion, in doubt, in silence, because in the end, what remains is not what was said, it's what was done, and done again, and done again. So continue, even if no one sees it, even if you don't see it yet, because what you're building already exists, still invisible, still rough, but already real, and sooner or later it will be impossible to ignore. That is the sound of transformation, not a shout, but an echo, one step after the other, a presence that insists, an identity that emerges, in the calm rhythm of truth, in the faithful beat of what no one sees, but what one day will be all that is seen.